Rod Thompson here. Today we're going to take a deep dive into some just gosh awful reporting out of the state of Florida on Governor Ron DeSantis. It's safe to say we did not have to look very hard. Per our normal agreement, the media is acting precisely as you would expect a Democrat spin operation to act. In the latest installment, and they really are just daily, we have the ongoing attempts by the Florida media to do anything possible other than admit that Governor Ron DeSantis has done a pretty darn good job handling the virus situation in Florida. All the numbers show it. Except the media doesn't report that, ever. They report the upside down world as usual. So today, I'm looking at just a horrible piece of reporting by the Palm Beach Post, meaning quite likely it'll win some journalism awards. Let's go through the story, and I'm going to show you exactly what Ron DeSantis has been up against constantly. His whole first term here, first part of his first term, but also specifically regarding the coronavirus. The headline for this story out of the Palm Beach Post is a series. It's one of several newspapers in the state that is just rabidly anti-DeSantis, anti-Republican, anti-conservative. It's a Gannett newspaper, I believe, like several of them are, so their stories are shared around the state. So what one of them does that's kind of a big deal amongst journalists gets shared with a bunch of other papers also. So this would be one of those. The headline, Coronavirus Investigation, DeSantis whack-a-mole approach fails to the frail nursing homes. So this is, they're going to call this an investigation. You'll see in the story, precious little investigation. They just called and talked to some people. There's hardly any numbers in here at all. Drop head for the story. Florida's governor didn't act promptly to identify outbreaks in elder care facilities and is now scrambling, a Palm Beach Post investigation has found. Well, let's just go through it and see if that's the case. Here's the lead paragraphs. As coronavirus deaths increase exponentially in elder care centers, Governor Ron DeSantis took a victory lap. All right. First of all, I don't think they know what exponential means, because exponential means a rate of growth that is rapidly out of proportion to the previous rate of growth. It's by orders of magnitude. So by 10, that's exponential growth. 10, 100, 1,000 would be an example of exponential growth. What you've seen is an increase. But of course, they're not media people, or they're not numbers people, that's for sure, and they're not very good words people. Other than that, they're great at their job. So, as coronavirus deaths increased exponentially in elder care centers, Governor Ron DeSantis took a victory lap, they reported snarkily. Along with fawning state officials and industry leaders, fawning, you see, this is a news story. This is a straight news story. He touted at a May 13th news conference that his actions prevented a catastrophe at nursing homes and assisted living facilities. First of all, as many of you know, I was in journalism in daily newspapers for about 20 years, in media for several years after that, in executive positions. And I will tell you that as a working reporter and editor, I would never be allowed, never been, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, I would never have been allowed to use these sorts of words in a news story. This sort of editorializing in a news story, fawning and touted. And I'm hoping somebody would have checked me on exponentially, probably not. And, make no mistake about it. The media has been biased since I've been in it. It's been, newsrooms in the 80s were dominated by leftists. The newsrooms I was in, probably pretty representative, small, mid-sized daily newspapers. And their hatred of Ronald Reagan was less than Donald Trump, but it was still pretty strong and vivid. They've been left for a long time. All right, back to this Palm Beach Post air quote story. Republican governor said he always knew and acted decisively at the beginning to protect the most vulnerable population, who he calls the tip of the spear for the pandemic in Florida. But DeSantis' whack-a-mole approach to long-term care facilities in the pandemic, as ARP calls it, has failed. All right, there's a few things going on here. First of all, let's remember ARP, the retired people, American Association of Retired People, is a hardcore Democrat organization. they suppose to support elders and elderly people, and that's where they get their money from. But they are actually now, they have morphed into, as so many organizations do, a hardcore Democrat organization. They are without doubt, just like so many other organizations on the left, acting unfailingly in support of Democrats and opposed to Republicans. So what Art calls it means very little, or should mean very little, unless, of course, you're a Democrat operative media person. So let's look at the numbers here. Right even before we go into this, we're going to look at some numbers that, trust me, this story has precious few in them. Investigation just drives me crazy. Investigation. It's very short on actual numbers and data, very short, but relies heavily on comments from people, some of them anonymous. So I will share with you some numbers that I found. I used a thing called the Google machine. It's a new invention. It actually, most of it comes from CDC sites, some comes from some other sites. 48% of Florida deaths were from nursing homes. Nationally, 43% of all U.S. deaths from COVID are in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. But you have to remember in those numbers, so that's 5 percentage points, not 5% media people, 5 percentage points above the national average. But everybody knows that Florida's an old state, right? I mean, we're technically tied for the oldest with Maine. But Maine is just so tiny. If just one big family grew old, I think that would tilt their numbers. Florida is essentially, for practical purposes, by far the oldest state as far as average age. We have a lot of senior citizens. That's why sometimes it's referred to as Heaven's Waiting Room. There's a reason for that. So you have to remember that the percent of our population in elder care facilities is much, much higher than the rest of the country. Not 5 percentage points higher, a lot higher. The problem is, in my research on this, I couldn't find out exactly how much higher because states which regulate these facilities count them differently. And while many states, like Florida, have nursing homes and assisted living facilities and other elder care facilities, other states clump them all together. Some do them separately. It was impossible to get an apples-to-apples comparison state to state as far as percentage of people in nursing homes or in elder care facilities as a percentage of the total population. I would love to have gotten that, so in a long time, couldn't find it. But obviously, a whole lot more in Florida than in the rest of the country, just because our population is just so old to start with. So let's look at that then, those numbers, with some other numbers for states in comparison whose populations are younger than ours. They have far fewer people in nursing homes. 48% in Florida, as you recall. 48% of coronavirus deaths were from nursing homes. In Massachusetts, that number is 61%. In North Carolina, that number is 63%. In New Hampshire, it's 77%. And in Minnesota, it's 81%. All of these states have smaller nursing home populations as a percentage of their total population than Florida does. So when you start looking at it that way, it's a little hard to see how it's going to hold up, according to the Palm Beach Post assertion here, that his approach to long-term care facilities during the pandemic has failed. We've had something like 1/5 of the number of deaths as New York, even though we have a lot more elderly people than New York. So, as normally the case here, there's very little to back up the assertion. So back to the Palm Beach Post story. Despite the proclamations, DeSantis didn't promptly identify outbreaks in elder care facilities and is now scrambling to stem the tide of cases and deaths, a Palm Beach Post investigation has found. Florida National Guard strike teams dispatched by DeSantis last month to test at nursing homes proved to be nothing more than a fly swatter against a viral swarm. First of all, I'm pretty sure it'd be news to DeSantis that he's scrambling and that his team is scrambling. They have been as on top of this or more than anybody in the country. With the predicate and the understanding that all reasonable people have is that nobody knew what was going on in February. And early March, it was still pretty foggy. I mean, everybody got it wrong. In Europe and the U.S. and across the states, pretty much everywhere, they got it wrong. And China's just lying about their numbers. That's just, they're worthless as far as looking at their numbers. It's not like they've done anything great. They just lie. So we don't do that quite so much here, although media sure does prevaricate a lot. But the reality here is that what they're asserting there is they're scrambling to catch up, and that the National Guard strike teams were just a fly swatter. So much of this, the assertions in these past two paragraphs are just not true. They're just not true. DeSantis shut down visitation of nursing homes on March 15th. March 15th. It's almost 2.5 months ago. Very early by national standards. Might have been the first to do it. That was huge to stop people from coming into nursing homes that might be carrying the contagion because elderly people are so susceptible to it. The state by early May had already provided personal protective equipment, the famous PPEs, including 10 million masks, 1 million gloves, more than 500,000 face shields, and 160,000 gowns for long-term care workers. This was all stuff that by early May had already been shipped to these nursing home facilities. This was a huge accomplishment in that the federal government wasn't able to come through in a lot of these areas because the shelves had been sort of used dry during the last epidemic during the Obama years, and they hadn't been replenished. So Florida was also, just as by way of reminder, was a leader on testing nationally. But none of this is enough for the Palm Beach Post because it wasn't perfect, which they can claim, duh, and we'll see that throughout here. So back to their story. COVID-19 fatalities linked to elder care centers comprise nearly half of the deaths in Florida, and the percentage rises every day. Now, by the way, this is true nationally. Nursing home deaths as a percentage continue to increase nationally. They do not mention that in their story. Kind of important context. If we were running counter to the national trend, this would be more relevant, but we're not. But here's the worst part. Here is the worst part, maybe the most flamingly frustrating part of this story for me as a journalist and somebody that knows just a little bit of math. The rest of the paragraph here is, yet nursing homes and ALF residents, that's assisted living facility residents, and staff comprise only 2% of the state's population. So what they're saying is literally COVID-19 fatalities linked to elder care centers comprise nearly half the deaths in Florida. Yet nursing homes and ALF residents and staff comprise only 2% of the state's population. Any of you out there understand the problem with this? Anybody recognize the problem here? That is the worst, most dishonest, or just flat out stupid reporting that you can do. What you need to do if you are an honest reporter, which, gosh, that's a rare breed, and that's the platypus out there somewhere. If you're an honest reporter, you would take the total number of residents in nursing homes as the denominator population, which is 2%, and then take the residents that died as the numerator above that. That would be one way to do it. Because the problem with doing this is they're suggesting that it's way out of bounds here. Look how terrible DeSantis has handled this. Only 2% of the state's population. Okay, I'm going to ask you if you think there's a disease out there, heart attack, cancer, obeseness, pick your disease out there. Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, pneumonia, flu. Pick your disease, your virus, your bacterial infection out there where elderly people are not dying at a much higher rate than the rest of the population. Is that on the governor of a state? No, that's nature. That's how nature works. This is just so stupid and frustratingly stupid. It defies, but here's the deal. Here's the deal. This is the mainstream media throughout Florida. So you have millions and millions and millions of Floridians who read this stuff every single day, and they're just trusting it and reading it as if it's true. Now, some of that's on them for not being critical readers, but a lot of that, I'm going to put most of that on the media for being just dishonest and terrible at their jobs. Next paragraph. I'll never even get through this. I mean, it's so bad in so many ways. But it's representative of what's going on every day regarding the reporting on DeSantis here. Next paragraph here. Between April and May, the death toll at nursing homes and assisted living facilities increased nearly 600% in Florida. 600%! By Thursday, COVID-19 deaths of residents and staff had topped 1,000. Now remember, by this point, deaths, the COVID-19 deaths of nursing home residents in New York had topped 5,000, 5 times more. But that is even a highly underestimated number underreported number because Governor Cuomo has decided, and his staff have decided, that if you get it in the nursing home and you're dying and you're rushed to the hospital and you die at the hospital, it doesn't count as a nursing home death. So I don't think anybody else in the country is counting them that way. Florida's not, but New York is. That's how you cheat on numbers. Media doesn't care about that. And they don't even report this comparison as bad as it is with that cheating on it. So they say that between April and May, the death toll at nursing homes and ALFs increased nearly 600%. You mean at the very peak of the global pandemic, they were increasing exponentially? By the way, this is exponential. This actually is exponential. If they actually knew what that word meant, instead of thinking, ooh, this makes it sound terrible. This is exponential. So you mean while there's a global pandemic sweeping the world and the United States, that death tolls at nursing homes, the people most vulnerable to any pandemic, was rising rapidly? What a shocker. And of course, is when it skyrocketed everywhere in the country. April and May are the months when it just took off across the country, right? No context in this, I'm sure, certainly to be award-nominated journalism, probably award-winning journalism. No context to give their readers an honest picture of what's going on. It's called more like a hit job, because that's what most media reporting is now, just one hit job after another. Next paragraph. Mary Mayhew, Secretary of the Agency for Healthcare Administration, said way back on March 16th that, quote, timely testing for our elderly and medically frail is mission critical, but it took a month for the first Florida cases, after the first Florida cases bubbled up on March 1st, before the administration even tried, they say, to get a grip on outbreaks by ordering elder care homes to report their COVID cases to the state. Now, first of all, let's just note there's a sleight of hand here. When they referred to Mary Mayhew and what she said, she was talking about timely testing for our elderly is mission critical. But, and they say but, so they're clearly linking this sentence with the previous sentence. But a month after the Florida cases bubbled up, on March 1st, before the administration even tried to get a grip on the outbreaks by ordering elder care homes to report their COVID cases to the state. Reporting, they shifted to reporting to the state, not testing, reporting to the state. So what they're saying here is that it was a month, when actually it looks like more like 2 weeks is the difference in this here, but it doesn't matter because it's apples and oranges. It's apples and oranges because you're not looking at the same thing. With Mary Mayhew, she was talking about testing, but then they shift right over to, with a but, so it's a linking word here, they shift right over to reported cases. Those are not the same things. That is only to say, look how bad DeSantis is doing this. So why, you might ask, are they reporting cases and it's such a big deal? I mean, apparently because that is most of the fault they could find, I guess, reported cases. This is something that the media has jumped on lately. It's not reporting the cases well enough. Man, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel to try and find fault here if that's where you're going, which is obviously where they go every day. How can we get DeSantis today? Just terrible reporting. It was just dishonest reporting. And I'm going to stop there. This story goes on and on. I mean, it goes on and on. But they actually, they talk to mostly... They talked to ARP, they talked to a couple of Democrats, they talked to a couple of nursing home people who saying that we're going to try and do better. We're working as hard as we can, but they don't actually notice what numbers. All the numbers pretty much in this whole thing that you've heard me talk about are ones that I researched and told you about, not stuff that was in this story. I think that it's, well, we're going to stop there. We're going to stop right there because it gives you a clear idea of what Governor Ron DeSantis is facing on a daily basis from the Florida media. And honestly, I can open the paper every single day here and find these stories. It is just constant. And I will say, well, I have one last thing here. If you're wondering where the headline came from, the whack-a-mole thing, I mean, this is like, I don't know, thousands of words into this story. I don't know, 30, 40 paragraphs into the story maybe, before before they get to what it is. And they go back to the ARP guy. Johnson is the head of Florida ARP here. And he says that actually his quote is that they have been doing, the DeSantis administration, he said he's empathetic to the task confronting DeSantis and the state health officials. Quote, they've been doing everything they can think of to do, but it hasn't been enough, he said. Until you can get to the point that you can test everybody before they walk in the door and know whether they carry the virus, you are always going to be playing whack-a-mole. So that's the context. So even this from assuredly a Democrat opponent of DeSantis saying that he's doing everything he can. DeSantis may have been doing everything he could, but it was not perfect. And compared to the perfect is all the Post can do to find fault with DeSantis. Compared to having done something perfectly, he didn't do it perfectly. Therefore, he's failed. The state of Florida has failed. I'll tell you what's failed here. What's been a total failure is this story. This air quote news story is a total failure as a piece of journalism. And it's typical for the Palm Beach Post and the Miami Herald and the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel and the, well, Tampa Bay Times is actually a little bit better than most of them. The Orlando Sentinel, often the Sarasota Herald Tribune, the Fort Myers News Press, Tallahassee Democrat. I mean, on and on and on these newspapers go. And it's just, you're reading one, it's just like reading another one. Different names of papers, different names of people, different DNAs in the makeup of the reporters, same reporting, same mindset, same block thinking. And it's bad and it's dishonest thinking. And that's what Republicans everywhere are up against. And that's what Governor DeSantis is up against.